Hello, and welcome back to the U Factor. We're here with another episode and another great guest. Before we get started, I would like to start off by recognizing that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas and the territory that is covered by the Williams Treaties. We are thankful for the opportunity to learn and grow on the lands of the peoples of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. So with that, we'll kick off. Today I've got joining me Kevin Magee. He is the CSO at Microsoft. But instead of me rambling on about him, Kevin, please introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. It's a real privilege, and I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm not the CISO or Chief Security Officer of Microsoft, just Microsoft Canada. But great role. Started 2 years ago in role to really bring together our security teams and to grow our security business over the last couple of years. Had a chance to take a small team and grow it by 700%. Lots of lessons learned, lots of engagement, involvement with the community. And I'm really passionate about some of the topics that you are as well. So I'm really pleased to talk to you about these things. How do we get more students engaged in our industry? How do we build the leadership skills and capacity of our industry? These are things that are very close and passionate to me as part of my professional career and also outside of my career as well.
Absolutely. So for those of you listening in, Kevin and I have been talking. We've had so many of these conversations on post advisory board call meetings and things like that. So we're finally getting to talk about it on the U Factor. This is something both near and dear to both of our hearts. Over the past several episodes of the U Factor, you've seen us talk to leaders about diversity. You've seen me talk to leaders about imposter syndrome. And now what we're doing is we're talking really about the leadership style and how leadership can benefit from listening to those that are entering fresh into the space. Now, I know we keep hearing that there's a hiring gap, there's a skills gap in cybersecurity. And Kevin, in the article you wrote, you pointed out that there is a bit of a leadership gap as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I think there's a few factors that are really at play right now in the market, and we're masking them as the skills gap, that there's not enough smart people or there's not enough trained people out there. And I think that takes away from some of the core challenges. I work with a lot of universities and colleges that are minting incredibly intelligent, incredibly experienced, incredibly passionate and aspiring security professionals that can't find a job. And then later in the day, I'll meet with a CISO who says, I just can't hire the right people. There's just not the right people out there. There's clearly a disconnect. And I believe a couple of things are at play. One is that we don't have a mechanism in our industry to get students from the graduate point to the full productivity or where companies really need them to be, like we do in other professions. You don't article like a lawyer does. You don't have an apprenticeship like you would if you became an electrician or whatnot. Doctors do this, lawyers do this, accountants do this. More mature professions have this mechanism. We don't in our industry. I think that's one challenge. Combine that with, we often promote the most technically capable person on the team to lead the team. And that person is not then given the advantage of having leadership training or leadership skills. And that's not why they were promoted. So why are we then surprised when they don't know how to identify talent, coach talent, develop talent, and really address some of these challenges up front? Because they're often hired because they're the most technically proficient, not because they're great leaders. So I think there's a few of these functions that are at play, and that's where I've sort of devoted my spare time to figuring out is how do we address and overcome some of these challenges.
Absolutely. Actually, this is a point that Vivian made on our last session. She mentioned that she's got two friends that she knows personally, not professionally, who went in and they applied for. They're leaders. They went and applied for positions and were turned away because they didn't have the soft skills. So it's interesting how there are certain places that are now really looking at that aspect of it. And another point you made, Kevin, is that we don't necessarily have like these internships exactly for cybersecurity. And this was a point one of your guests made during the Future Leaders conversation at CISO Forum, which was people coming in that are highly educated, but they don't have any kind of industry experience. So, what is your advice for leaders that are hiring and are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis now?
We can, as leaders and hiring managers, continue to price ourselves out of the market by looking at a finite group of people with everything we want and outbidding each other for those people. Or we can take a more mature and long-term approach, which is we're going to have to take risks. We're going to have to hire some people who are not going to have the aptitude. We're going to have to maybe take 3 to 5 years to invest in someone to build their talent. They may quit and go somewhere else. That's okay. But we need to be willing to do that. So we need to balance our needs for today with the future and take a much different approach to capacity building in our industry, not just our own organization, as opposed to competing for limited talent. Because at some point, these models break. We don't have the budgets to continue to fight for this talent, and we're leaving a lot of opportunities left untapped in terms of individuals that really desperately want to be in our industry, but then leave and go pursue a career in another industry because they just can't find a role in our industry. So that's one of the things as leaders we need to do better, and then take concrete steps to find what are the barriers in your organization. Like, what are the real barriers for someone applying? Go through the process from start to finish and start to identify how we can remove those barriers and obstacles and how we can enable and empower those individuals to navigate our hiring process or our recruiting process or whatnot as well. And selfishly, that's a good thing for me, because if I can do that, then I might get access to the up and coming talent that I don't have to purchase on the market. I can develop in-house, who will then hopefully pay it forward to the next generation as well.
Well, you've given me so many points. I don't know which one to go after first. So I'm going to go after 100%. We become a little tunnel visioned with our own hiring processes because they've been in place for so long and it's just the same thing. But sometimes you have to step outside and almost be an undercover boss in your own organization to see, is your hiring practice actually working? The steps that you have in place, because we've seen issues. I mean, LinkedIn's rife with, people sharing job descriptions that have, really out there expectations, or they're looking for things that just don't exist. And again, they're often written by those that are just given the task of writing the job description, not necessarily the hiring manager. So that's absolutely something I agree that we really need to, kind of step away and take a look at. The other thing you spoke about was just looking at people outside of our very narrow profile that gets created. One of the things again, you mentioned in your article was that if one of the top concerns for your organization is ransomware, maybe look at someone who has a criminology degree. And that sentence kind of really sat with me, and I was like, that's just so logical, and we don't really think about it that way. So do you have any advice for hiring managers or for organizations on kind of opening up their minds when it comes to these things?
Yeah, and what you're referring to, I wrote an article where I said I talked to a lot of CISOs and say, tell me about the composition of your team, and they're all got 90% in their degrees at top computer science schools, so it's a specific profile. And then I asked them what their primary concern is for threats, and they say ransomware. Ransomware is a criminal attack.
Yeah.
Social engineering, you've hired the wrong profile to defend against that. So I think, what do we look for? It needs to be not just intelligent. It needs to not just be the safe. Like no one's going to get fired from hiring the valedictorian from the University of Waterloo computer science program. But that might, we don't need a team of those. Diverse teams bring diverse points of view and can tackle different challenges. So hiring people with international experience is key to me. I love to see people who've worked in other areas. I like people who've had other businesses before or worked in other businesses. One lady I've worked with for a number of years, she was a dental hygienist. before she became a cybersecurity professional. And I've asked her a number of times, to talk to potential candidates and whatnot, what made her a great cybersecurity professional. And her response was, well, when you have to get someone to trust you enough to put your hand in their mouth and spend an hour, cleaning their teeth, you create some skills, some people skills, and some trust building skills and whatnot, and how to influence people. Those skills translated very well into cybersecurity. Intelligence is important, but cleverness, tenacity,
Yeah.
you know, traits that maybe wouldn't make a great accountant make a great cybersecurity professional, and they can be found in any profession. I think what motivates people to join cybersecurity is to be able to leverage those talents, to solve puzzles, to have interesting problems. And we all started in another industry and gravitated towards cybersecurity. When I got into, there was no cybersecurity professional or profession even, but it was the challenges, it was the puzzles, it was the ability to tap those hacker qualities when hacker was still a good thing, and they can be found in anyone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific school or program. Often we keep going to the same schools, to the same programs, and we wonder why we get the same results. It's not that they're not doing a great job. We need to think diversely.
Well, I mean, your dental hygienist has been socially engineering people for her entire career, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was a great fit. But that's really, one of your guests actually mentioned this on the session that you did at CISO Forum, which was you're bringing if you're bringing someone in that is 100% what you're looking for, or has hits the job description at 100%. By the way, if you're applying for a job that is 100%, you hit the capacity, don't apply. It's no room for growth for you. But at the same time, one of your guests mentioned that they're actually, the organization that she was with, they're looking to find people that are smarter than them. And I think that's such a great concept. And then that's what I look for even in my teams, is like, you know what, if you can do what I do and do it better, that's what I need. And that's what I know we've spoken about this, which is like that reverse mentorship, and just, kind of looking at that diverse thought that you're going to get from this person. You're going to get feedback. And again, you want to hire someone smarter than you, because if you've just hired someone who can do exactly what you can, you've just basically cloned yourself.
And that doesn't just apply to smart, that applies to all other factors and characteristics of the individual. Often we're looking for culture fit when we hire someone, or we're looking to screen in candidates that fit a profile. When you do that, you apply bias, because if they're a cultural fit, you need those people to shake it up. That's what security professionals do. They shake it up. If you want to hire to a specific profile, what if you don't know the best way to do it? And therefore you created a job description of someone who is not ideal. We look at it differently. We look at not screening out candidates, but screening in. What does this candidate, when we do debriefs after an interview, what does this candidate bring to the team, to the organization, to the role, to our customers that other candidates do not? And when you change that vocabulary and you flip the script on the debrief to not what they did right and they didn't do, or how they scored, to what interesting things do they bring to the role, you have incredible conversations about adding diversity, adding different perspectives to your team that would have been lost otherwise. And it's a subtle change in how you look at candidates and how you talk about candidates and how you evaluate candidates. But again, look to screen in. What are the positives? What are the things that they bring that no one else does that can add to the team? And really, that's the starting point for building a diverse team, to start thinking that way when you're hiring.
And I agree with you, to think outside of culture fit. Because if you're asking for someone to fit into a box, that's not diverse. What you're asking them to do is come in and fall in line. And really, what it should be is you growing as your team grows, right? When a new person comes onto your team, your culture should shift and it should change to be more accommodating. Now, I know, Kevin, you had a couple of really big wins on your team. I know you were discussing it. So talk to us a little about that. I know you've converted one entire team, and I'll let you tell our audience about it.
Well, when I assumed the role, we had an all-male team just over 2 years ago, and I had two tasks. One was to grow the team about 700%, which is in about an 18-month time frame, and
Oh,
the
wow.
other was to look at diversity. How could we diversify the team? So we had a unique opportunity when you're growing that fast to look at diversity. We initially failed. We weren't getting applicants. We weren't seeing women. We weren't seeing other groups that we wanted to see in the pool represented. So we stopped the process and we went back to basics. And one of the things I did, which I explained at I believe the CISO forum, was I recruited a reverse mentoring advisory board where I recruited a number of young women within the organization, and they nominated some other people that could meet with me on a weekly basis throughout the process and advise me on what we were doing wrong and how we could shift our thinking. And we took the process from end to end. It's called value stream mapping is the process we use. And we walked every stage of the process, and we learned things. So one, we were asking mandatory questions. If you didn't meet the 5 mandatory questions, you didn't move forward. We thought they were softball questions, at least I did. But what we were seeing in the data was women were self-selecting out because if they only met 4 of the 5 or didn't feel comfortable, they wouldn't click it. So our process, unbeknownst to us, was biased towards men, and we were able to take the approach to then fix that. We immediately saw more candidates move to progress to the next level. We ensured that every interview, we would have panel interviews with 2-3 interviewers, had a woman and a man. Was it changed the dynamic of the discussion. People could join and see people like them interviewing, and it really changed the conversation and brought out new discussions we would never have. So be critical of your process. Don't feel if you've designed it that it is working. Look at the data, but also bring in third-party people to advise you. And I love this reverse mentoring approach where I get challenged. I get to benefit from those who have gone through the process and experienced it firsthand on how we can better the process. And that was one of the keys to our success, is listening to the exact people that we wanted to hire tell us what we could do better and improve. And through that, we were able to hire many more women, many more international candidates, some immigrants that would wanted to come to Canada and we're struggling finding the right role, and that are all performing incredible, as well as neurodiverse candidates, which we had to adapt our hiring process to meet their needs. And when we did, it opened up a whole new pool of candidates that are contribute amazing things to our organization that, because of our processes, we had no visibility to previously.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the things that I love that you guys were able to achieve is you changed your process. It's a known fact. Vivian and I spoke about this as well in the last session. It is a demonstrated, a known fact that women will not apply to a job if they don't meet an X number of qualifications, and men will apply even if they hit, like, I think it was about 60 or even 40%, and women try to aim for like the 60 or 70% mark, or
a known fact to
even
you.
higher.
It wasn't to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, this is something I've been reading quite a bit on LinkedIn, that it's, women really, really do, like you said, they self-check out, right? And they say, you know what, I don't hit this many qualifications on this job, or I couldn't do these roles and responsibilities, so I'm just not even going to bother applying. But instead of putting that onus on the person applying, you took that process and said, how could we make this better? How can we change the questions? So this is something that, I mean, if more organizations took this on and rather put the pressure on those that are applying, you took it internally and fixed that process. That's amazing. I mean, that's something that really other organizations should definitely learn from. And again, look at your process and see what's broken and how you can fix it. But how did we get there? It was through that reverse mentoring, right? Which was to take a new perspective, to take a young perspective, for example. So talk to me. I know this is something that is very close to you, near and dear to your heart, because when we were putting CISO Forum together, one of the first topics you said is, I want to have one where it's future leaders talking to us, talking to the CISOs. Well, I'm not a CISO, talking about Kevin, but with basically having that conversation in reverse. So talk to me a little bit about where this passion comes from, and a little bit about how this reverse mentoring idea came up, and how it's impacted you.
I remember the first millennial I ended up managing, and I'm a Generation X. I really struggled to communicate with him. What do you mean you don't own a car? Well, I live at Yonge and Sheppard. I can take the subway everywhere. And there's this Uber. What is Uber? I remember he had to show me how to download Uber and call an Uber. I'm like, this is not a taxi. This is someone car we're getting into. What do you mean you rent? You don't own a house? Well, that way it can be more mobile. And the more I met millennials, the more I liked them, and the more I thought, boy, they have stuff figured out that I don't. My generation was raised by the boomers to, buy a big house in the country with 4.2 bedrooms and so many kids and cars and chase corner offices and titles, and we're all miserable, our generation. Um, the millennials don't subscribe to many of the things that I take for granted you're supposed to do in life. And I just love the perspective change. And I found myself gravitating more and more to seeking their advice. That's where it really started for me is I was imposing my worldview and they wouldn't have any of it, which was fantastic. And that's where it began. And I've started to develop a pool of these trusted individuals that either have worked for me or I've met through for work that I will take ideas to and run them by. And sometimes they're the most junior people in an organization, but they have a unique perspective. They have a unique idea. It gives them a chance to really shine. And through this process, what occurred to me, and I think this is the most important lesson for people of my generation, is I'm 50 years old. I'm a white Anglo-Saxon male. I grew up in Canada. I entered the workforce at the dawn of the internet age in 1993 when the internet and Netscape browser was brand new. Windows 95 was yet to come. I have had every privilege imaginable in my career. And so, one, acknowledging that and understanding that my perspective is not the common perspective of the individuals out there. What can I do? And we've talked about things that I challenge people to give me actions to take. One of them is I won't sit on a panel if I'm asked at a conference, unless there's equal representation of women or another area of diversity. And I will recommend those that don't have the chance. Most conference organizers are really happy to do that, and everyone wins. And I don't need to be on every panel. Everyone gets sick of my point of view as well too. But the second, it really comes down to I have this gigantic microphone for who I am, the privileges I have, and my role at Microsoft. How can I, instead of taking the spotlight for myself, how can I pass that microphone to others to really highlight their success and whatnot? And that takes some humbleness, that takes some humility, and it also, is a really rewarding thing when you see those that take the mic, excel, and get some of the credit that they are due as well. So that's the type of things I've sort of learned over the last, I guess, 10-ish, 15 years of my career, and I continue to learn every day. We call this a growth mindset at Microsoft. I'm not a know-it-all, I'm a learn-it-all. I never feel I'm the expert in the room. There's always something I can learn from, and it doesn't have to be from someone smarter than me, older than me, whatnot. I'm always looking for a different perspective and a different point of view. And that mindset shift can be incredibly powerful in achieving your results, but also in helping others to achieve theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, side note, for all the grief the millennials gave you, the next generation is going to give them just as much. Let me tell you.
I do
Okay,
enjoy watching millennials argue with boomers, having been a Gen X as well.
you got right in between there. But
Yeah.
Kevin, with everything you've said, it takes a certain degree of self-awareness as well to recognize this. A lot of people don't recognize their own privilege. So, I mean, I thank you, and I actually use you as an example constantly when I'm talking to allies or getting people to promote their allies. Because, I mean, the first time when we were running one of the sessions, you said, hey, listen, you've got a 50-50 split, but I can recommend a female speaker to sit on this panel. And it was one of those things where I said, you know what, amazing, but instead of, let me just add a seat because I could, right? And those like it's so, I was very appreciative of the fact that you promoted someone else, and the fact that a lot of people don't recognize that they have the ability to do that. Approach the conference organizers that have asked you to speak, or if you're doing a session or whatever it is that you have the opportunity. If you have the opportunity to share the limelight, absolutely go ahead and offer it, because I'm sure the person receiving will be very appreciative, as well as the people that are organizing the conference or the session that you're a part of. So I really do thank you for being such a wonderful ally. And again, just side note, I use you as an example all the time.
That is a good example.
Throwing that out there. One of the things I wanted to talk about is it's not easy for all leaders to do what you did, which is to, ask for that advice for someone they consider junior. So where can someone start from, especially someone who's, maybe not as comfortable saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to take advice from someone who's just walked into the field and I've got 20 years of experience. Where can someone start from, or where can a leader start from when they're looking to put together their board or their, reverse mentoring program?
I think it's really, and it's tougher in the pandemic in some ways. In some ways, it's easier. One of the greatest experience I had was walking to a women's at Microsoft event where I was the only man in the organization, and it was one of the women that said, "You got to come, Kevin. You got to come experience this." It was the first time I experienced being the only man in a room,
Yeah.
but this is what women experience all the time.
Yeah.
The first time when we hired a number of women and they had an all women call and it was a big deal and took a screenshot of it, it never occurred to me that this is a unique thing. Another meeting, we were talking to the leadership at Microsoft and the president asked a final word from me, and I said, I've spoken enough. I would like to hear from this other woman who hasn't really had a chance to contribute. And I thought I was just being polite. And that's just a nice Canadian thing to do. You know, Afterwards she spoke to me and said, I can't believe you did that, and gave the chance to highlight yourself in front of the president, and gave me that opportunity. I was scared to speak throughout the entire conversation. You gave me the confidence. So part of me is ashamed of myself that I didn't know all these things going forward. But I've had the great opportunity by really seeking to learn, and to be pointed out, some of these things, and be given some specific guidance by women or other folks, other diverse areas of what to do. And I think that's where allies really, we want to help, but we don't know what to do. So a simple thing where I can make a difference, like saying I won't sit on a conference panel unless it's diverse. That's a simple thing to do. If we can find ways to equip allies with more actionable items, more will happen. We kind of leave it vague. It's not enough to just say I'm an ally. What are you doing to demonstrate you're an ally, and what are you doing to make change? And I'm constantly seeking ideas and feedback on concrete things I can do. Neurodiversity is another area. I wasn't really sure how to communicate with someone that had autism. So I read some books, I took some training that our company offered, and really had to adapt my communication style to be much more blunt, which I felt very impolite.
Yeah.
My whole character rebelled. But the results were the individual found that I was creating clarity. I was speaking to him in a way that he could really internalize what I was asking and act on it, which ultimately made him more successful. So again, seeking answers, seeking actionable answers, and seeking folks that will help guide you and tell you bluntly, what you need to do to improve as well too, has been key to my success. And luckily I'm surrounded by incredible women, incredible diverse talent at Microsoft that I can take some questions to them and get those responses. And I've built that trust to have a great conversation with as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really happy you brought up the concept or the thought, around neurodiverse talent, because that's something that I know, there's been a really big push towards, really ensuring that there is safe spaces. And I mean, I come from an organization where I worked with individuals with intellectual disabilities, and often we saw there were lots and lots of barriers. And even when an organization was able to bring on an employee that was neurodivergent, they didn't know how to maintain that employee, because there was a lot of, just, how do we communicate, things are not working out. So there was that constant just headbutting. So again, the fact that, like you said, read up on it, talk to your teams. If there's trainings available, take a look, because they will only, anyone you hire on your team will only make it better. Every person you bring on will have a new optic, will have a new viewpoint. So it absolutely is only beneficial to the organization. So I know we're coming sort of towards the end of our time here. I wanted to turn it over to you, Kevin. Any final thoughts that you wanted to throw out?
Just I love that we're having these conversations. And when you asked me to join the Women in Cybersecurity Conference as a co-chair, I thought, but I'm a man. What I didn't understand why, but we had a great discussion, and maybe you can explain to the audience why you reached out to me. But it was to add that diverse
Yeah.
voice. It was the reverse, and I
Yes.
thought, oh, that's an interesting approach to that caught me by surprise. So you surprised me and taught me something through that process, and I didn't feel I contributed much to the process because I felt like I was learning more than I was contributing. But that's okay too. I think that's a good outcome as well. So would love to sort of turn it over to you and say, what was your thought process in asking a 50-year-old white Anglo-Saxon male to help co-chair a Women in Security conference?
Well, your impact was huge. I mean, for those of you listening
Mhm.
in, our advisory board chairs have oversight in all of the topics. So, all of the wonderful topics you heard, Kevin and the other chairs had a huge hand in helping us finalize that selection. But that is exactly what it is. You were the diverse voice on in the chairs this time. So we try to ensure that all of our boards are diverse, and that includes our Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Board. We wanted to ensure that we bring, the male perspective on this. Two things happened during our conference. One is that we really want to, like you said, promote allies. There are so many out there, and they just don't know what is the right action for me to take. But when they see someone like yourself, Kevin, I mean, like CSO, Microsoft Canada, put the Canada in there this time. But you're taking a very visible stance and saying, you know what, I'm here to support and I'm here to promote. It helps someone else that's either starting out or is in a leadership position but hasn't known how to really promote their allyship. When they see someone that is, what, it's again, it's representation for them. So it's saying, you know what, this is something that I can contribute to. And we hear this. I mean, even at the end of our CISO forum, when we had our congratulatory call at the end with all of our advisors, we had several who stepped up and said, we would love to be allies and be a part of the Canadian Women Conference, which is exactly what we need. We need people to continue to push the envelope. And again, you can be an ally, and I mean, anyone can be an ally. That's the great part of this, right? You don't have to be a specific role or have a specific title or do a specific thing to be an ally. All it takes is for you to, like Kevin said, share your limelight. Share your spotlight. It's not about taking it completely away from yourself, but it's about sharing. And that's actually what we're going to do right now. So at the end of every episode, Kevin, I always ask my guests to amplify a diverse voice because I recognize that I, right now, am in a position of privilege. And I have this platform here that I get to talk to all these wonderful guests and reach out to all of these wonderful viewers. So I'm going to ask you, Kevin, to amplify a diverse voice, someone that has either impacted you or, it can be anybody that you'd like to amplify. So I'll turn it over to you.
I'll choose Megan Doherty. She's on my team. She's a technical specialist. She's about 4 years, 5 years out of university. We hired her 2 years ago, 2 years out of university. She was my first woman hire on an all-male team that was vastly older than her. My first pandemic hire, and I've still yet to meet her throughout the pandemic as well. So she had all these challenges joining the team, and yet she became the rock on which I built the diverse team that we have today. It was her initial coaching. It was her welcoming those new people. It was her setting the bar to say, what do we need to do to change? How can we think differently? So the least likely on paper candidate actually provided the most incredible impact. And I have to tell a story, and I hope she sees this, about how she got the job. On paper, she wouldn't have traditionally been the right candidate. And this is how screening in really makes a difference. She called every member on my team and said, I want to be on this team. This is what I want to do. Coach me on how to approach Kevin for a job. Then she called my boss, the vice president of security for Canada, and asked him to coach her on how to approach me for a job. And then she approached me for a job. Cleverness, tenacity, social engineering, initiative. She didn't tell me how good she was. She showed me how good she was. I can tell you, when I heard all this, I was dying to meet this person.
Yeah. I'm
That
dying here.
that's the opposite of what happens when you just submit a resume and you're just part of a pool. So she really showed me what she was capable of initially, and continues every day to show me and amaze me what she's capable of as an individual and set the bar for excellence. And I can tell you that older male team, when they saw her and what she was able to accomplish and the initiative she took, it immediately raised the bar for the team and made us better, not just from a diverse sense of point of views and whatnot, energy on the team, just different approaches. They were keeping up with her, not the other way around, pretty much immediately. So I hope she sees this, and I hope she realizes how much of an impact that she's had, not only on our team and our organization, but on me as a leader.
Amazing. So we're going to tag her. We're going to make sure we tag her both on Cyber Exchange on the platform and on LinkedIn to let her know.
Wonderful.
But this is, I mean, what an amazing story. I mean, she's blazing her own path, but at the same time, she was able to help you create that diverse team. So it's, again, not only did she find a space for herself, but she helped make space for other women. So I think that's, a phenomenal story. So I'm actually really looking forward to meeting Megan now. She seems like just an amazing person. So thank you for sharing that story. We'll really make sure that we amplify her. But so this brings us to the end of our time. Kevin, I'm going to thank you so much for joining me today and for having this conversation that we've been having for so long. We finally get to have it on the U Factor. And for those of you listening in, we'll be back again in another 2 weeks. If you have a topic or a question, please feel free to connect with the team, and we'll see you next time.